Hello and welcome to HKA Talks To. Today we are joined by Alexander Nissen, QC, a barrister at Keating Chambers. Alexander has been described as unparalleled in his field and specialises in construction, engineering, energy and professional negligence disputes. Alexander, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
To start, I think it would be helpful if you can just provide a brief overview of your practice and the types of disputes that you're typically involved in.
Yes, certainly. At its core is construction and engineering and infrastructure projects, both domestic and international. I do a lot of PFI related work too, and the forums are adjudication, arbitration and litigation, with a pretty good mix across all three. And I sit as arbitrator and Deputy High Court Judge in the TCC.
Okay.
So that covers all the bases.
Yeah, sure. I wonder, obviously we're very much in the throes of the pandemic at the moment, and if anything we seem to be moving out of it, but I wonder if you've seen a change or noticed a specific change in the way clients view or approach disputes during the pandemic period.
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, it's been much more difficult to gear up and contest the things that were already in the diary for people. But they've got a very clear message from their counterparts and from tribunals and courts that we're going to keep business as usual as it can be in the circumstances. And so that's what is happening. I mean, there was obviously a few people testing it early in the climate to see whether things were going to get shunted off. And by and large, they haven't been. I mean, the courts, again, sent a very clear message about that. And so I think on the international front, what I've seen is a few of those hearings certainly early went off. But everyone has obviously moved into the virtual world much more than they had before. And so for claimants, of course, they want their cases on, they want to carry on with their adjudications, they want to carry on with their arbitrations and so on. And so they're going to press on. And respondents who didn't want to pay anyway will obviously try and use COVID as a reason to try and delay things. But from my perspective, the message seems to be carry on. There's quite a helpful case which I dug up just for the purpose of today, which is TCC case called Municipio de Mariana, 2020 case, obviously. And the judge in that sets out some very good material for, firstly, to decide whether a virtual hearing should go ahead, including a substantive trial, setting out all the criteria, which is very helpful. And secondly, what are the criteria that you would apply for extensions of time with which to comply with procedural directions on account of the logistical difficulties that poses, both for solicitors and indeed for experts too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's really helpful. We'll include a copy of that.
I just wonder that so you think there's a continued appetite for pursuers through litigation, arbitration. There's no let up in that respect.
No, I don't think so. Quite the contrary. And I mean, I've been obviously the most immediate impact one sees in that respect is domestic adjudication. And there's certainly, as far as I can see, is absolutely no let up from that at all. And similarly, the courts are continuing to routinely enforce adjudicators' decisions through the standard enforcement process, which is all being done through remote hearings very successfully, as I know because I've done one.
Absolutely. I mean, in our experience, it seems that adjudication seems to be on the up rather than anything else at the moment. But
absolutely.
So
I mean, obviously, there's a question which will arise in respect of insolvency processes and so on. But at the moment, at least, people are trying to smash and grab when they can.
Sure.
So how have lawyers changed the way that they interact and engage with chambers since the pandemic hit?
Well, obviously, there's a lot more zooming around, which we didn't have before. Yeah. I think also my experience, certainly during the absolute height of the lockdown, is that people actually wanted to talk more. And so we have much more phone contact than what would normally be a standard email, which was really good because people wanted a reason to have a conversation, and so that was good. But I mean, obviously, because of technology, you can pretty much get hold of anybody at any time, and so there's been full engagement with Chambers as far as we're concerned. Anyone is on call to pick up messages or refer work or whatever it may be. We did recently a big interactive session with I think 10 of people from Keating and about 20 from one particular firm of solicitors, where the conversation was about the new world of working together, and everyone thought that it was working very well and very successfully. And the other added bonus, unsurprisingly, is that you get people who are all around the country in different offices or maybe different time zones, all being able to participate in stuff that they just simply wouldn't have had the time for because of travel and so on. And so there's a trade-off there, but certainly in terms of interaction with Chambers, it's been absolutely smooth. Yeah, so good. And
do you anticipate, a lot of that's going to continue as, even as things move forward and we perhaps have a bit more freedom of movement? You anticipate that a lot of those kind of virtual elements will stay because it's just more efficient?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's no reason not to. It's just an added thing that we didn't have before. I don't say it's going to transform every meeting that's going to take place, that we're not going to have conferences and meetings with clients and all the rest of it, being able to liaise with experts. Those things are, face-to-face is still helpful, it's still important. But I think all that will happen is that on each occasion, there's now a prior question, which is, well, how are we going to do this? And then there'll be a value judgment taken about what's the way to go. And I think, in a sense, that's the same exercise that's going to be done with courts and arbitrations going forward. Obviously, there's a big question about how successful remote hearings have been and how they're going to supplant, or they're not going to supplant, the future world. And obviously we can't be sure how people's practices will change, but my experience of them, it has been, and I say this as counsel and as tribunal or judge, my experience has been good, and generally it works well, but it's not for every case, and there are clearly circumstances where it's not ideal, and so the answer is going to be, well, let's make a value judgment in this case, for this meeting, for this hearing, for this trial, and debate the very question of how it should take place. I mean, the courts are moving now into the next stage, if you like, which is, well, you can have a completely normal hearing, you can have a virtual hearing, or you can have a hybrid hearing. So now there's this idea that you can have, for example, the barristers in the court, the judge, and the various other people dotted here and there. So there's a pick and mix menu there for every occasion in order to decide what's the best for that case. That's obviously got to be a good thing because there's choice involved. But I'm certainly not thinking that we're going to lose court hearings now or arbitration hearings. I don't think that anyone feels it's as good. I think people have been refreshingly surprised about how good it is.
Yes.
To me, a different question from, is it good enough to supplant the face-to-face in-person hearing? And the answer to that must be, it depends on the situation.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's exactly a case of need, isn't it? Do we need to do this? Do we need to fly these witnesses halfway around the globe, or can they suitably go on a video and testify on that basis? Because there's a wider issue, isn't there? It's not just, obviously the focus is COVID at the moment, but generally in industry, there's a push for more sustainable development, looking at things like travel, and we've all jetted around halfway around the world for a matter of days and then jetted back, haven't we, been involved in arbitrations and what have you, and you do think sometimes this is really necessary. I mean, just coming back to your point about the online procedures, and you noted that you've carried out both in respect of a dispute decider and also as an advocate, and you mentioned that some kinds of cases suit the online forum a little bit better than others. So I just wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
which kind of case.
Yeah, obviously the main things I've been dealing with so far have been procedural or substantive, but one-day type hearings. Where you've got live evidence, obviously there's a huge preference for having that dealt with in person. But arbitrations, of course, in the past have dealt with the occasional witness through a virtual process. And again, as I said, nobody can justifiably say it's as good giving live evidence where you're testing either the credibility or the expertise, credibility of a factual witness or the expertise of an expert witness. You can't really easily do that. You have to if there's a pandemic around, but there's a question over its suitability. And you know, occasionally we've had to do it because of logistics or flight problems or whatever it may be, and arbitration has been more adept at that, I think, than the TCC and the commercial courts, but they have done it. I've cross-examined witnesses before sitting in America and whatnot, so it does happen, but it's not ideal. You've got to deal with logistical issues like time changes, time zones. I mean, I've had to get up at 3 in the morning for a hearing in Dubai, which wasn't brilliant because you know, you have to adjust for everybody else's time zone, and expecting judges to do that is obviously a big ask. But you know, if it comes at huge cost saving, then people may be prepared to do it. And that's why I say it's really something to look at in the mix. But generally, for procedural hearings or hearings that involve discrete issues or submissions, then where it's largely the representatives that are speaking, that they work best, without a doubt.
Yeah, sure.
Have you sort of noticed or made any changes in your style of advocacy in a virtual hearing compared to an in-person one, or is it pretty much the same approach?
I haven't. I mean, I've heard a few people say brevity has been the focus because everyone gets very tired listening to stuff. Well, they always get tired listening to me anyway. But so more focus has been what people have suggested. I haven't noticed a huge amount of difference in what I've seen. One of the interesting details which hadn't occurred to me, which somebody had pointed out, is that, of course, as counsel, you're at the front talking to the judge, and neither your solicitors nor your clients can see you. That's different now. Everyone can see you. I mean, it doesn't change the way you do it, but it's an interesting dynamic which I hadn't actually thought of.
Yeah, no, likewise.
And I think the webcams are good enough to pick up most of the. You don't get the body language, but you can get the facial language from the tribunal. You can definitely see if they're if they're unhappy. So I think there's enough there to do it. The only thing I would say about the advocacy is that it's much more difficult, of course, to refer to documents. I mean, we've all got the electronic bundles, we can all maneuver our way around, but the process of getting to the documents, getting to the paragraph and so on is a bit of a chore. And so I suppose there's a little bit less physical cross-referencing of saying, can I now take you to this? Can I now take you to that? There's there's a greater assumption that the tribunals read that and therefore don't need to be taken to it. But that's only a slight difference, I would say.
Do you think that perhaps the issue of giving witness evidence over a remote form gives the witnesses, either of fact or of expert opinion, a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more of a comfort zone to be able to take the time and respond? Do you think so? There's a bit more advantageous to witnesses?
Only if the camera freezes, I guess. I don't think there's much in that, to be honest. It's momentary, and they've got plenty. I mean, witnesses of fact will have plenty else to be mastering. I mean, the novelty of that experience is going to be, unique, of being cross-examined or whatever. So I don't think it matters much. One tip, though, that does arise in respect of the giving of factual evidence is that, of course, when a witness goes into the witness box, you know that there's nobody helping them, you know that they haven't got their notes with them, and so on.
Yeah.
Now, there is a check that should be made when it starts giving evidence. Have you got anybody in the room? Who are they? And have you put all your notes away, and so on?
Sure.
Because that's, I think I've heard one or two stories where it's only become apparent afterwards that there was somebody else in the room, perfectly innocently, but misunderstanding the nature of their role.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
And then looking ahead, a lot of what we touched on here has been quite positive, actually, and I just wondered what permanent changes you think we're going to hold on to once we kind of move well away from the position we're in now, and I guess that applies to not only just the legal industry but to the kind of the construction and engineering industry as well. Whether you think there'll be any kind of permanent changes?
Well, as I say, yes is the answer. There must be, and the biggest change is going to be asking for every meeting and for every hearing and for every element of the process, what is the type of process we now need to be involved in? Does it absolutely require physical face-to-face engagement? People will understand the reasons for that now much more than they ever would. We've accepted as the norm now things that 6 months ago would have been unthinkable. I mean, the idea of doing a trial by Skype would have been absolutely unthinkable, and now it's happening. So yes, it will change the way we all interact. Of course, it will change the industry. People will want to engage with their clients. Developers will want to engage with contractors. People will want to engage with their experts, and all of those processes can take place through the technology we have, and they're using much more regularly. So I think that's good. I think there's one particular concern I have, which is a generational one. Actually, it cuts across all industries. So the younger generation, by definition, are much more tech savvy than the older generation. Hurrah, that's all great. But there is a downside, which is the absence of ability to pass on experience, which you learn from essentially osmosis, sitting next to people, working in the same office as people who've done all this stuff 100 times before. And I'm saying this, it doesn't matter whether you're a barrister, whether you're a solicitor, whether you're a programmer, whether you're an architect, whatever and wherever. We all learn from the generation that went before. And sitting in your spare bedroom on a Zoom call, you're not gonna get that. So for all the advantages that the youngsters have over the mastering of the technology, there's a risk, it seems to me, that they don't remain committed to the human endeavour too, because I think they will lose out. I don't think that will happen, but it seems to me it's something to watch, that's for sure. And that is not for the legal profession, it's for every profession.
Do you think you'll look at the kind of the structure and management of chambers in light of that? Are there any kind of particular changes there where you think, okay, there's the technology advantages, but what do we do around that? Just things like culture and style, and that kind of being able to, as a pupil or as a junior tenant, to be able to stroll down the corridor and speak to one of the QCs in chambers and just having an informal conversation about something. Are there any ideas of how you might be able to replicate that? Or
well, I think we would definitely try to encourage youngsters, and obviously pupils you particularly mentioned, to come in as regularly, as often as they can, for that very reason. Working from home is obviously going to be an option for everybody now, but it always has been if you're self-employed, but for the employed sector, of course, it's going to become an option, and it enables, you know, people with family commitments and all the rest of it to do that, and that's all terrific. But certainly for youngsters, I would, if it has anything to do with me, I would positively encourage more of a continuation of life as it was before, for the reasons I mentioned, which I think is terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be careful of the dilution.
Yeah,
and as I say, it's industry wide. It's not just the legal expert or any specific sector.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, in summary, I would say what the pandemic has showed us is that which we thought was unachievable is achievable. Is it as good as what was there before? In all respects, probably not, but on many occasions it'll be good enough. It's just I can't believe it's going to go higher than that, I must say.
Yeah, thank you. Good insights.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alexander.
Good, nice to see you.